Hello everybody, this is Ahmed and this is another episode of the Breakout podcast here at the School of Advanced Studies, SAS, University of Tumen. And today I have with me here on the podcast Pedro, who is a traveler, a professor, and many other things. And I'm really so happy to have him on the podcast today. And we will be talking about too many things, and most importantly, his educational experience, because Pedro has a very unique, interesting educational experience. But before that, as we agreed, is that first of all, this is not your first time to be here in Russia.
No, it's the first time.
Right. But and how did you come to Russia in the first place?
Right. Okay. So I can say that I'm already have Russian in many senses. I've been traveling in Russia ever since 2007. So I think it was the first time I was here, and I actually engaged in a voluntary project. I was working in an orphanage in Nizhny Novgorod. To be completely honest, I knew nothing about Russia. I couldn't even read Cyrillic, and I didn't know anything about like culture, history, anything like at all. I had just got a girlfriend in Moscow, and I decided, it was a great idea to visit her and then engage in this volunteer project in Nizhny Novgorod. So I came here, and I kind of like fell in love a bit with the culture and with the people. Russians say like dushi, very, soul-minded and very amazing people in many senses from a soul point of view. So I decided to start learning the language and, increasingly started traveling. So I've been, living in Belarus and Moscow for a while, in Kazakhstan, all Russian-speaking countries. So yeah,
that's wonderful actually. And that was like, so when you volunteered to come to Nizhny Novgorod, like there was a choice at least before you, or you actually chose to, like, firstly, you wanted to come to Russia, or simply it was the only option available?
Oh, not at all. I really wanted to come to Russia, so I thought engaging in such a project would be the perfect way to blending into the society a bit. I don't like the feeling of being a tourist. That's why I would consider myself not a tourist, but a traveler in that sense. So I felt it was really the best way to also contribute with something. And the experience was fairly unique. I've been engaged in some other volunteer projects before, but this one, especially given that it's with children, right, quite made a difference in me. And it really, got me started on learning like Russian culture and so on. And just a bit of an anecdote, when I was back home in Spain, I realized I knew nothing about Russia. So I had been in a country I knew nothing about. And one day I just dreamt of Lenin, like waking up in the mausoleum and telling me that I should learn Soviet history. So I did follow his rule.
And what were you studying back at the time?
I was studying mathematics.
Oh my God.
I didn't know anything at all about like Soviet history. Even like Lenin was completely strange to me.
Wow.
So I had a dream that I still have goosebumps when I remember it.
That's like an epiphany or what?
Yeah, it's like an epiphany, one that I have followed because 15 years later I'm still here. So
yeah, and so you were studying mathematics. You had that the dream about studying history, and then you followed this simply dream because you felt like some sort of there is a quest that you need to follow. And how this impacted your studying of history then?
It did. I have never studied history as such in an academic fashion, but I started like reading a lot about Soviet Union and everything that happened ever since 1917 and so on. And then I moved to Czech Republic, to see what were some of the consequences of communism in Europe and so on that were still very alien to me. And I think back at the time I was still studying mathematics, but something was already growing in me, in a sense, as in like be more related to international relations, especially towards the East, rather than focusing on a scientific career. So I think it was a little seed that was planted and germinated with time.
So yeah, that's really interesting because then you moved from mathematics to history, and then
not history, but politics, right?
Politics, right? And then that was already masters. right? But then you did the PhD, but you didn't do it, of course, in Russia, but you did it somewhere else. So what did you do? Where did you do it? And actually, what did you study as well?
So I studied my bachelor and master's in mathematics. Started working as a mathematician. I was working as an astronomer. And then I got a scholarship from the European Union to go work in Palestine, in the West Bank, as a professor of mathematics there at the university. And I increasingly realized that I was much more a political subject, let's say, than a scientific one. Even though I still, up to date, love science and mathematics, but I realized that I was much more into the society and how politics relate to society than mathematics. So I still try to hang on to science a bit. I tried to take a master, an engineering master in France, but then I completely realized it was not my thing, and I was much more into geopolitics. So I dropped that to start studying a master in politics. So I studied 2 masters in politics at the Spanish University and at the Spanish Ministry of Defense back in time. And then I enrolled in the PhD. At first I was in Moscow in the Higher School of Economics, and then I moved to Queen Mary University in London.
Wow, okay. And so I'm always actually interested in this thing, is that so in the idea that also traveling and seeing other places and also being interactive, I mean, you simply encounter other people from different cultures and all of that. And for some reason, I think it happens with everybody, but on various degrees, is that this encounter with other cultures affect people's lives in different ways. For example, I came to Russia and I just wanted to study, actually. I studied before that, I studied for 4 years, but I haven't finished it. I did simply a bachelor in English literature and linguistics, but before three months before I graduate, I left. Because I was like, that's not my thing.
It's not your thing.
So yeah. And when I came to Russia to study, and then afterwards I stayed, firstly I wanted to study something related to politics because I was interested more in that. But then afterwards I ended up studying cultural studies and doing stuff related to education. But I'm coming back to the international kind of studying international politics or international relations. I'm coming back to that as well. But I think most of what I can attribute to my educational kind of path was encountering many people that fascinated me in a certain way, right? And I'm really interested also to know from you, for example, I spoke with Andre about that and how also people affected him, or how being in a different environment affected his kind of educational path and his way of looking at the world. So how then firstly coming to Russia and then traveling around what we can call the post-Soviet world, right? And then coming back to Europe and then going to Palestine, because these are really three different worlds.
Different places, yeah.
Yeah. How do you think that then, if we can reflect, for example, on the spot, on for example, your educational path and how you look at the world, how these 3 worlds kind of impacted your vision of the world and as well as what you learned?
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a very clear triangle to me. I mean, kind of like Europe or the West, the Middle East and Russia, right? Or like the former Soviet space. I think each of it gave me something pretty different. So the Middle East gave me actually a sense of how real things look like. You know, it's probably the region that we hear about the most in the world. The most conflictive in many senses, you know, but then you go there and you realize, life is to many extents absolutely normal, and there's the de-idealization, right, of how zones in conflict or with apparent conflicts, right, have a daily life. So that was really clarifying for me and opened up my mind a lot in terms of traveling, you know, as in there's absolutely nothing to fear, or it's not that I feared it back in time, but you know, it's just normal place, normal people, you know, and you can make your life there. So it gave me a lot. Instead, broadening my mind there. Then traveling in all the Soviet space, I think that is harder for me to explain because it is a more I mean, in the Middle East, I had a specific, let's say, geopolitical interest or like social interest. In Russia, up to today, I mean, after 16 years, I cannot really explain what attaches me to the place. But when I'm like singing Russian songs, you know, with Russian friends, I realize like I've become a bit like this, you know, like it is really inside me now. It's not that I still have like a very specific reason in academic terms, you know, or like more epistemological terms to be here. It's more like my soul drives me here all the time. I mean, the way that I actually encountered SAS was very coincidental. I was just traveling in Russia for 3 months because I needed a break from the West. Like that's the way that I saw it. I needed a break from the West, and for me, Russia means that space, you know, like that outer space. Well, the ontological relations are completely different to that in the West. So yeah, and then Spain is my home. So.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So I haven't been in the West. I haven't been in Europe, but and I'm just gonna think out loud with you here is that because I can resonate with what you are saying right now about Russia. But there is this idea that also when I was talking with Eva, she also hasn't been in Russia. Never, but she dreamed all the time about coming to Russia. And she, eventually when she came here, she just didn't want to come back. She felt like there is part of her soul as well stays here and belongs to here, to the people, to the culture, to the environment, and so on and so forth. And talking about the Middle East, for example, and Russia, what I can say is that maybe I don't know, and here you can correct me, please, is that in Europe maybe you are just a member of the society. You are just somebody there, and in the Middle East there is always events that are bigger than you that will always overwhelm your actions in the society. While here in Russia, you can feel your impact. You can simply have a sense of your actions. I don't know, and maybe that's why the ones who are kind of most active, the ones who would like to see their impact in life, they like it here. Is that they feel like their soul is comforted here because they see kind of consequences to what they are doing. I don't know. This is an hypothesis of mine.
That's an amazing way to put it. I have to say, on the one in the Middle East, I completely agree to it, and I realize, especially living in Beirut, in Cairo, like some things are bigger than you. It doesn't really matter what you are, and to some extent you feel a bit insignificant in terms of like there's another layer which is much more important, right? Even like social dynamic that would completely swallow you. I was in Egypt at the time of the revolution, and then in the anniversary with Morsi, when Morsi was actually being ousted. So quite convulsive, you know, like quite problematic times, and I could really feel like that. In terms of Europe, yeah, you're right. I think we were more individualist, although Spain I could probably see as being a bit different. Probably south of Europe is being a bit different to that. I've been also living in London for 3 years, and there you totally feel you're just an individual with your, like, I don't know, school size kingdom, right? And that's the only thing that matters. But here in Russia, it's true that you understand that there's an impact being made at let's say, at a higher level. So not at a superficial one, but at a much more emotional, you know, soul level. And I can relate to it, the way that people treat me in Russia. You know, like all these words like "gastiprinnosti" and stuff like that. I can really feel, when I've spent some time with people, how they relate to me. I realize that the impact that I made, and probably that they made in myself, but they're probably more aware than I am, has been quite profound. In that I agree, it's hard to find it in Europe. It's not that easy, yeah.
And why do you think that this is maybe that? Okay, you say that you can resonate with people, you can simply have kind of this. We can say that this connection on emotional level with them here in Russia, they can simply share with you some sort of the same feelings, the same depth, the depth of feelings, and in the West maybe it's not the same. So my question is that, in your opinion, why, for example, there is, if an individualistic society can have these problems, why exactly this problem? Why there is always this tension?
Well, it's hard to know. I think a more individualistic society is more related to the benefit of the individual, right? And even though you care for other people, you tend to forget that you're part of something bigger, right? As we were saying. Now, I can see this something bigger being different in the Middle East and Russia. Here in Russia, I feel as being something, as being part of something bigger. In the Middle East, I feel like being swallowed, right, by something bigger. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the remains of I don't know, the more collectivist society, you know. Because in the surface, I can feel that Russian society has become very individualistic, but you can see that deep down is not that way. They're still having this collectivist approach. So I think it's still somewhere there underlying, yeah. That would be my guess.
And how then for example, so you have this diverse experience in life and as well the really diverse experience in education. How then in your way of behaving, or not behaving, acting in the world, also doing your research, writing, teaching students, how all of that come together and simply kinda help you guide the students or your readers or even the people that you interact with, how all of that impact their lives as well?
Yeah, okay, well that's a good question. I think, and I'll probably relate to my teaching in social science here. I think after traveling for quite a while and engaging in many projects with refugees in war zones, so being in the field many times in risky places, I felt that I had something to tell students, and I really felt for the first time when I was in Kazakhstan teaching some students from Central Asia that there was a lot of potential in teaching them and actually showing them that the pictures they see are not black and white, and the reality is much more nuanced, and teaching them, or like, let's say, guiding them in the way to thinking critically, right, out of, you know, all propaganda and stuff that we are subjected to. So I think that gave me a distinction or something demarcating, something different in terms of the teaching. Probably in academic terms, I can feel that the many people are much better prepared than I am, especially given the fact that I have a background in mathematics, not in social science. But in terms of like life experience, I think I have a unique thing to tell the students. So I would see that as my biggest asset.
Yeah, because I see that your life experience even influenced your educational one, and then because of that you saw like a goal in what you are doing.
Absolutely,
or
yeah.
a vocation.
Oh, teaching is absolutely vocational for me. Yeah, absolutely, yeah, 100%.
I don't know. I feel like this is the impact that a professor can simply have on a student, or I think also it has to do something. It has to do with the shared simply human experience. So because you were in the Middle East, you were also in Russia, and then you came back to the West, and then you taught in London, and so on and so forth. So you could also provide simply, I don't know, an analysis of things that can help, I don't know, echo what the students cannot articulate in words.
Yeah, I think that those professors that really make an impact in your life, and then you as a professor can reproduce, right, with your future students, are those that can give you the global picture that you're not able to see, right? I mean, like, not only about the world, that might be my case, but also life-wise. As in, like, you know, when we were young, we're just so focused on like what to do next, or like what am I doing now. You don't really have the wisdom, right, to reflect on the global picture. I remember a professor in mathematics gave me the picture for the very first time. It was quite of a lonely realization to me, because I realized that I was absolutely swallowed by my daily life, you know, and I didn't have like any future prospects. And he gave me that picture, you know, and showed to me like, you need to start thinking about the future, you know, and start seeing things, maybe not in the long run, but in a, you know, middle run. So yeah, I think that is what we can provide.
Yeah, I feel like the professors that simply had this, I don't know, great impact on my, I don't know, whether it's life decisions or simply academic kind of interest or intellectual interest. I think that the ones that I had this click when they said something that I really had in my mind,
Right, yeah.
but I couldn't articulate it in words.
Yeah.
And I was like, how? Yeah, and they say it in front of me, and then I asked them about something, and I'm like, it feels like they lived in Cairo.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And then I'm like, as if we have a shared experience, and now they understand what I'm thinking about. Yeah, and then I can kind of have this, I can perceive afterwards the teachings of this professor on a completely different level.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like, it comes first to this human experience, then because of it, maybe that we can then simply have a greater impact on each other on an intellectual level.
Yeah, I absolutely agree to that. I call those moments the crystallizing realizations, right? Like when something has been in your mind for a while and then somebody puts words on it or even like express it in some sense, and then it all, right? Like as that domino effect makes sense suddenly. And it's like, oh God, that was it, right? Like that was it, yeah. And so I completely relate to it. And I feel it's exactly what you say, like the way, I mean, if you relate personally to the students and they understand where you come from, not only on a geographical point of view, but also in a more like transcendental point of view, right? Then they can understand what you're doing and why you do it that way and what is the meaning of it, right? Otherwise, sometimes it is just like painful for them, like doing things in such a way that it will be more, I don't know, costly in terms of work, in terms of time, right? So yeah, I absolutely agree to that. I always try to relate very personally to the students.
Yeah, because sometimes really when also sometimes that can be, I think it's a double-edged sword. In the sense is that when there is a student, because sometimes also I teach, and there are some students, for example, they say stuff. So we are discussing some sort of a text, and then the student says something, and then another student says another thing, and then I say another thing, and so on and so forth. It's a seminar, for example, we are discussing a text. And then one of these students who are very active kind of misses the point, in my opinion. All right? And then I feel like they don't have a rich life experience. And then I'm like, what can I do about that? I can't do anything. This student is clearly clueless about how life is nuanced. As you just said, it's not like black and white. Just life is nuanced, and the events are always nuanced. And you need to delve into, I don't know, if you cannot experience it yourself, to go to Palestine or Cairo in order to live this stuff, you will have, I don't know to do what. And then I feel like, I can't do anything about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely agree to that. I mean, not all the students are open-minded enough or receptive enough to understand these kind of things that we want to transmit, right? And I think that's part of the frustration of being a professor, right? That understanding and realizing that some students will just not change in that way. They'll still see the picture in a white and black perspective, and nothing you tell them, because of maybe their emotional learnings from the past, and nothing will make them change. And yeah, I guess we have to live with that. I think with the years I've become a bit less optimistic in the amount of students, let's say the quantity of students that I can make a change in, and I'm looking more into the quality of what a change I can make in a few of them. So yeah, I'm gonna stick to that.
I'm just trying to put it into words. Is that there is a benefit in having something bigger than yourself. For example, you had this dream, Lenin comes to you, you believed in it, and you were like, wow, and it changed your life, but you were receptive to that. So what can we do, for example, to cultivate such a thing, such a quality in the students, for them to be receptive to changing, to exploring something that is bigger than them, and it's unknown, by the way.
Yeah, it's unknown.
Studying politics, studying history, studying all of the fields that you have been studying after mathematics was completely unknown to you. But for some reason, you were receptive to that.
Well, it is the fear of the unknown, right? That makes us very anxious. And I was trying to tell the students this lesson by David Foster Wallace. a sociologist from the United States, talking about the way that we operate in our default settings, right? Like the reality is the way we wanted to see it, and we are like in our school size universe, and then just seeing the reality the way that it is acceptable for us, right? And very few times we try to transgress this skepticism, right? And the few people that can do it can really see the bigger picture, as you were saying, like being part of something bigger that you cannot understand, and then probably scientific rationality and the neo-positivist education in the West probably doesn't allow you to see anyway, right? Believing in something more. It's not about religion, it's not about magic, it's even bigger than that. But believing that there's something in the uncertain, in the bigger picture, that means more than you do, and that you're part of it.
Yeah, and I just I always kind of have this. It's just a challenge to me. Is that how can a student or how can a person simply be, a believer in something bigger than themselves, unless they have a rich life experience? I always be like, and also I don't know. I have also this weird idea that also sometimes these people cannot be receptive to something bigger than themselves unless they suffered before that. I mean, or see suffering, or see struggling, see kind of a thing that will shock them, kind of a shock. And then they will be like, by the way, there is always something bigger than we are, all right? And because of that, they can be receptive to other things, to bigger things. So, yeah, it's just the thing is that we have we simply have different lives and different life experiences, but I always feel like the people who didn't maybe experience life in kind of conflicted areas, like you went to Palestine or you were in Cairo during the time of revolution and the protests and all of that, right? And you didn't see the big thing, right? Then you wouldn't understand that big thing that you need to believe in.
That actually reminds me of a conversation that I had some time ago in summer with a friend from Bashkiria. I spent some time there, and it's a very magic area, right, with its nature and it's so like soul in itself. And we were discussing this topic on whether we can actually go or like progress without times of crisis, right? So we're talking about a more personal level, but I think it can completely extrapolate to the social, more collective level, right? Can you actually, as a human being, can you actually make any progress without going through times of pain, through times of depression, of crisis, and so on? I want to believe we can. I still haven't found a way personally, but I believe that it is possible. So, of course, like being confronted to this bigger realities kind of like fosters the process or speeds it up. But I believe we can, and I have some certain acquaintances here in Russia that without having ever left Russia, you know, like without having ever like gone to another country, they're able to see it, and that gives me hope. And the fact that, you know, like you don't need to travel all the world to understand what bigger picture we're part of. So yeah, I believe it is possible. Yeah.
That was a very good reflection, I think, right? On Pedro's path, educational one and also life one, traveling between three different worlds and seeing the world from the eyes of three different people, if we can say that, or three different profiles, we can say that, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ahmed. I love the discussion. I didn't expect it to be so touching and so really? Metaphysical from many senses. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, really, I'm really happy that we had a nice discussion. And you liked it so much. You really, that's so kind of you, of course. And guys, questions, comments, anything, just anytime. And see you.